Yasha's salon was now filled with mirrors, a symbol of her newfound freedom. Clients admired themselves in the reflections, and the atmosphere was livelier than ever. But for Yasha, the joy of liberation was tinged with unease. Although the evil spirit was gone, something deep inside her felt unsettled. One evening, after a long day of styling hair, Yasha sat alone in her now quiet salon. The glow from the overhead lights reflected off the mirrors, casting gentle light across the room. As she looked at her reflection, a wave of emotion hit her. For the first time in years, she was able to look at herself without fear. Yet tears welled up in her eyes. She had lost so much of her life to the next day. Zuri visited the salon. She had become a close friend and confidant to Yasha, visiting often to check on her. Sensing Yasha's distress, Zuri asked, "Are you okay? You seem different, Yasha." Yasha hesitated before speaking. "I thought I would feel free, Zuri, but I still feel haunted. It's like a shadow from my past is still lingering." Zuri's eyes narrowed in concern. "What do you mean?" "The spirit is gone, Yasha. You should be at peace." Yasha shook her head. "It's not the spirit itself. It's the memories, the fear, the things I lost because of it. I can't stop thinking about what could have been if I hadn't been cursed." Zuri sat down beside Yasha, her voice soft. "You've been through so much. It's normal to feel this way, but you're stronger than your past. You broke free, and that's what matters." But Zuri's reassurance didn't lift the weight from Yasha's heart. That night, Yasha couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, memories from her childhood flooding her mind. Visions of her mother taking her to the spirit, the fear in her young heart, and the moment she realized she was trapped in a life she didn't choose haunted her dreams. The following morning, Yasha found herself standing outside her mother's old house. She hadn't visited in years, not since she discovered the truth about the spirit. The house was dilapidated, with ivy creeping up the walls and the windows covered in dust. Despite her fear, Yasha knew she had to confront her past. Entering the house, Yasha was hit by the smell of mildew and the overwhelming sense of abandonment. The furniture was covered in sheets and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. As she walked through the rooms, memories flashed before her eyes. Her mother's stern face, the rituals they performed, the promises made to the spirit. In her mother's old bedroom, Yasha found a box hidden under the bed. Opening it, she discovered old letters, photographs, and a journal. As she flipped through the pages, she realized the journal belonged to her mother. It detailed her mother's desperation, her desire for power, and the fateful decision to bind Yasha to the spirit. One entry caught Yasha's eye. "I had no choice. The spirit promised me everything I wanted: wealth, power, and a daughter who would be the greatest hairstylist in the land. But I didn't know the price would be her freedom. I've regretted it every day since. If only there were a way to undo what I've done." Yasha's hands trembled as she read the words. Her mother had been remorseful, but it didn't change the fact that she had sacrificed Yasha's freedom for her own desires. Anger and sorrow battled within Yasha's heart. She wanted to hate her mother, but she also wanted to understand her. As Yasha left the house, she realized she wasn't just haunted by the spirit, she was haunted by the choices her mother had made and the life that had been stolen from her. She needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them. The next day, Yasha visited the elderly woman who had helped Zuri trap the spirit. The woman welcomed Yasha with a knowing look, as if she had been expecting her. "I see the past is still heavy on your heart, Yasha," the elderly woman said gently. Yasha nodded. "I found my mother's journal. She regretted what she did, but it doesn't change what happened. Is there any way to make peace with it?" The elderly woman sighed, her eyes filled with wisdom. "The scars of the past run deep, Yasha. But healing begins with understanding. Your mother was driven by fear and desperation. She believed she was doing what was best, even though it was wrong. But I'm the one who paid the price," Yasha whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes," the woman agreed, "and that is the tragedy of it. But you have the power to break the cycle, to live your life on your own terms now. You've already taken the first step by freeing yourself from the spirit. The next step is to forgive, not just your mother, but yourself." "Forgive myself?" Yasha asked, puzzled. "You've carried guilt, haven't you?" Guilt for not being strong enough to break free sooner. Guilt for the life you lost. But that guilt is misplaced. You were a victim of circumstances beyond your control. It's time to let go of that guilt and embrace the life you have now. Yasha sat quietly, absorbing the woman's words. It wouldn't be easy, but she knew it was the truth. Forgiving herself and her mother was the only way to truly move forward. As Yasha left the elderly woman's home, she felt a sense of resolve. The shadows of her past would always be there, but they didn't have to define her. She was free to live her life, to create new memories that weren't tainted by fear. Back at the salon, Yasha was greeted by her clients and staff who had become like family to her. The mirrors reflected her image as she walked through the salon, and for the first time, Yasha smiled at her reflection without a hint of sadness. She was no longer haunted by what had been, but was instead focused on what could be. And so the chapter of Yasha's life as a prisoner of the past closed, and a new chapter began, one filled with hope, healing, and the promise of a future she could finally call her own. But little did Yasha know, a new challenge was on the horizon, one that would test her strength and resolve in ways she had never imagined. The shadows of the past had not entirely left her, and a new mystery was about to unfold, threatening the peace she had fought so hard to achieve. But this time, Yasha was ready. Yasha's life had finally begun to stabilize after her encounter with the evil spirit. She was rebuilding her confidence, and her salon was thriving more than ever. Clients from far and wide came to see the famous stylist who had defied dark forces. But as the days passed, Yasha couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching her. It started with small things. At first, Yasha noticed strange occurrences in the salon, mirrors slightly out of place, hairpins disappearing, and a cold breeze that seemed to sweep through the room, even when the windows were closed. Her staff dismissed it as her imagination, but Yasha felt a growing sense of unease. One evening, long after the salon had closed, Yasha decided to stay late to reorganize supplies. As she worked, she heard a faint creaking sound. She paused, listening intently. The creaking grew louder, coming from the hallway that led to the back room. Her heart pounded as she slowly approached the door. As she reached for the doorknob, the creaking stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Yasha hesitated, but then took a deep breath and opened the door. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a street lamp outside. She scanned the room but saw nothing unusual, just the usual supplies and equipment neatly arranged. Relieved but still on edge, Yasha turned to leave, but something caught her eye, a small object lying on the floor in the middle of the room. She bent down to pick it up and froze. It was a hairpin, but not just any hairpin. It was the same one she had lost years ago, the one her mother had given her as a child. Yasha's mind raced. How could this be here? She had lost this pin long before she ever opened the salon. The hairpin's presence sent a chill down her spine, and she felt the air grow colder around her. Suddenly, a voice whispered her name, so faint it was almost inaudible. Yasha! She spun around, eyes wide with fear, but the room was empty. The voice had sounded like her mother's, but that was impossible. Yasha's mother had passed away years ago. Trembling, Yasha clutched the hairpin tightly and quickly left the room, locking the door behind her. The next day, Yasha couldn't concentrate. The events of the previous night haunted her thoughts, and she decided to confide in Zuri. Over tea at Zuri's home, Yasha explained what had happened, showing her the hairpin. Zuri examined the pin carefully, her brow furrowed. "This is strange, Yasha. You said you lost this when you were a child." "Yes," Yasha replied, her voice shaky. "I thought it was gone forever. How could it just appear in the salon?" Zuri leaned back in her chair, deep in thought. "It's possible that whatever is happening is connected to your past, Yasha. Maybe there's something unresolved, something that's trying to reach out to you." Yasha's eyes widened. "But I thought I was free. The spirit is gone, isn't it?" Zuri nodded. "Yes, the spirit is gone, but the past is a complicated thing. Sometimes it leaves echoes behind, especially if there are unresolved emotions or secrets." "Secrets?" Yasha asked, a sense of dread filling her. Zuri hesitated before speaking. "Yasha, is there anything about your mother or your childhood that you haven't fully dealt with? Anything that might explain why her voice, or something that sounds like her, would be calling out to you. Yasha thought back to her visit to her mother's house, to the journal she had found. She had read her mother's regrets, but she had never really confronted the pain of her childhood. The loneliness, the fear, the sense of betrayal. She had buried it deep inside, trying to move on. But perhaps she realized now she hadn't truly let it go. "I don't know, Zuri," Yasha said, tears welling up in her eyes. "There's so much about my past that I've tried to forget. Maybe I need to face it." Zuri reached out and took Yasha's hand. "You don't have to do it alone, Yasha. I'm here with you, and we'll figure this out together." Later that night, Yasha found herself standing outside her mother's house once more. The dilapidated building loomed before her, its windows dark and foreboding. But this time, Yasha wasn't afraid. She knew she had to confront whatever it was that was haunting her. As she entered the house, the same eerie silence greeted her. Yasha walked through the rooms, her footsteps echoing off the walls. She made her way to her mother's bedroom and stood in the center of the room, clutching the hairpin tightly. "Mother," Yasha called out softly, her voice trembling, "if you're here, if there's something you need to tell me, please, show me." For a moment, nothing happened. But then a cold breeze swept through the room and the door slowly creaked open. Yasha turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, a shadowy silhouette, barely visible in the dim light. The figure stepped forward and Yasha's heart stopped. It was her mother, or at least it looked like her. The figure was translucent, almost ghostly, and its face was a blur of features. But the voice that spoke was unmistakable. "Yasha," the figure whispered, its tone filled with sorrow. Yasha's eyes filled with tears. "Mother, why are you here? What do you want from me?" The figure moved closer, reaching out a hand. "I'm sorry, Yasha. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I was weak, and I made a terrible mistake. But there is something you must know. Something I never told you." Yasha's breath caught in her throat. "What is it?" The figure hesitated, as if struggling to find the words. "There is another spirit. It was not just the one that helped you braid hair. There is a darker force, one that I bound myself to before you were born. It's still out there, and it's angry. It knows you are free, and it will come for you." Yasha felt a wave of fear wash over her. "What do you mean? What does it want?" The figure's voice grew faint. "It wants to reclaim what it believes belongs to it. Me, you, our family. It's powerful, Yasha, and it's coming." Before Yasha could respond, the figure began to fade, its form dissolving into the shadows. "Mother, wait!" Yasha cried out, but it was too late. The figure was gone, leaving Yasha alone in the dark room. Terrified and confused, Yasha rushed out of the house and back to the salon, her mind racing. There was another spirit, a more powerful one, and it was coming for her. She had thought she was free, but now it seemed her ordeal was far from over. Back at the salon, Yasha found Zuri waiting for her. The look of panic on Yasha's face told Zuri everything she needed to know. "What happened?" Zuri asked urgently. Yasha took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "There's another spirit, Zuri. My mother, she warned me. It's coming for me, and I don't know how to stop it." Zuri's expression hardened with determination. "We stopped one spirit, Yasha. We can stop this one too. But we need to prepare." The two women spent the rest of the night devising a plan. They knew they would need more than just the help of the elderly woman this time. This spirit was older, darker, and far more dangerous than the last. They would need to gather knowledge, resources, and allies. As dawn approached, Yasha felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just a victim of her past. She was a fighter, and she was determined to protect her future. But deep down, a seed of fear remained, growing with every passing moment. The shadows of the past were back, and this time they were more dangerous than ever. The battle for Yasha's soul was far from over, and the darkest chapter of her story had only just begun.